Ladies and gentlemen, hi. Someone left this jacket in the restaurant. There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, I was waiting for our presenters to come out. I think they may be coming now. Here we go. My introduction will be short, so I thought it was nice to have them on the stage, ready to roll. So good evening, and a very special welcome to tonight's event. I'm Judy Trotter, Head of Adult Education, and it's so good to see a full room with both familiar and new faces. JW3 is the home for Jewish culture, conversation, and education, and of course that includes sport. This time last year, I stood in this same spot and said I'd never imagined I would be introducing a talk about choose and cricket, and to such a full room. And by the end of that evening, I said to Daniel that we had to do this again. So here we are. Of course, since then, our world has turned on its axis. And since October the 7th, we have worked at keeping the JW3 and wider community connected to each other and to Israel, with new programs covering the war between Israel and Hamas, as multiple projects to highlight the ongoing plight of the hostages, which we will keep on doing. But it makes this evening even more special, especially on a week with such excitement, inverted commas for some of us, of the tennis, the Grand Prix, the Euros, and of course the start of the cricket test series. And as we did last year, I want to dedicate tonight to Daniel's father, Gavin Lightman, who was one of our favourite students and a very special person. So at this point, please can you check that your mobile phones are either on silent or turned off? I know there's lots of results coming through, but please, thank you. We will take some questions towards the end. Please wait for the microphone to come to you, and please keep them as questions and short questions so we have plenty of time for everyone. There'll be lots of time to chat after the event. We'll end at 8:45, and the cafe will stay open until 9:30 so that you can continue the conversation. And I do plead with everyone to leave the room because our poor duty managers and tech guys have to take this room completely down to nothing because we start very early tomorrow with a Yiddish parade rehearsal. We're all about variety here. So a huge thank you to our distinguished panelists for joining us this evening. I'm going to briefly introduce them. Giles Coren is a columnist, a restaurant critic, a radio presenter, and in cricketing terms, a wily left-arm spinner. Try and make it sound like I know what that means. I've learned a lot this evening already. Jonathan Freedland is a Guardian columnist, presenter of Radio 4's The Long View and podcasts. His love of the Test series started in 1978 at the Oval, watching England play, and he's never looked back. And occasionally we win, apparently. And he's also very regular. He's almost part of our JW3 family. It's lovely to welcome you in a different guise this evening, Jonathan. Andy Zaltzman presents the weekly news quiz on Radio 4. His love of cricket evolved while watching television in the 1980s, as England lost to every known cricketing opposition. Yet he was entranced, and he's now a Test match special statistician. Hard word to say. And it's now my pleasure to introduce and hand over to Daniel Lightman. Daniel is a King's Counsel, but his heart lies with cricket. He's had articles in Wisden, The Cricketer, and Night's Watchman. He curated the first ever exhibition at the MCC Museum on Jews and Cricket, which can still be seen and should be seen. Daniel, over to you, with many thanks for putting this evening together.
Thank you very much, Judy. I'd like to start by asking a few questions individually of our three distinguished panelists, and then I will raise a few questions which will be addressed by all three. And I'd like to start with Andy. Andy, could you explain to us how you first got interested in cricket?
Well, probably like many cricket fans of my generation, it was just from being plonked in front of the television as a child during summer holidays, as basically a means of child control. My mother had 3 children, and once it became clear that she could put me in front of the television at 11 a.m, and if there was cricket on, I'd still be there at 6 p.m. That became a pretty simple way of dealing with things. So I just, what my dad had been a bit of a cricket fan. He was more into rugby, and I don't really remember sitting watching cricket with him. But I just remember spending hours and hours and hours watching cricket on the telly. And then my parents gave me some cricket books when I was about 7, and they had Bill Frindle's stats charts and wagon wheel graphs in the back, and that sort of kicked off my statistical obsession. I didn't realise at the time I was investing in my future career, but so it was really just, I don't know what about it fascinated me initially, but having sort of got into it as a 7-year-old in 1981, I don't have any sort of clear memories of the famous Botham's Ashes summer, but as I said, my dad gave me a couple of books about it, and by the next summer when England played India and Pakistan, I was absolutely obsessed with it. And that's summer holidays, watching England play Imran Khan's Pakistan, still some of my clearest cricketing memories. So I guess it was, a lack of alternatives. When there was only 3 TV channels, you didn't have a lot of choice in what you watched. And I guess it was, the variety of cricket, that the sort of the narrative possibility of it, the style of the game, the fact that it took a lot of time appealed to me. So it was really just that. And then we did live for a couple of years in a village that had right by the village cricket pitch. So I would watch low-grade cricket and imagine that these people weren't that far off. I remember asking village cricketers for their autographs, which they seemed quite surprised by. So, but yeah, it was just a sort of childhood obsession, and that was my main interest really for most of my childhood. And my wild teenage years involved trawling the second-hand bookshops of Tunbridge Wells looking for 1930s cricket books. So that was it was advanced nerdery, I guess. Yeah.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
Can I ask another connection I have with you, which is we both studied classics.
Yes.
Do you see a connection between an affinity or an interest in classics and an interest in cricket?
I don't know. I haven't run the stats on that one. Although there are times when I'm on air on Test Match Special with Daniel Norcross and Vic Marks, then there are 3 Oxford classicists on at the same time in a classic BBC diversity programme. So I don't know. I mean, there's something sort of epic about a Test match. It's almost like the Greeks and the Trojans. I mean, 10 years. I think even a 10-year Test match might be pushing my attention spans. But so I guess it is that element of these huge, great, sprawling narratives, and I guess a lot of thinking time. I think the ancient Greeks would have loved it if they'd got around to developing Test cricket to go with all their other stuff.
And can you give us your favourite cricket stats, a couple of them?
Well, I mean, it's quite hard. It's like picking your favourite single star in the sky when there are infinite stats available. There's one, when we've got the West Indies series starting on Wednesday, and Test cricket has become, the way it's played now, I think it's much more attacking than it's ever been. And we've seen that particularly with England in the last couple of years. You go back to the 50s and 60s, the game had really ground to a halt. It became very tactically cautious. And the 1960s, England played 47 overseas tests in the 1960s. 34 of them were drawn. And it did seem like a lot of top-level cricket was really some sort of scheme to eradicate the entire concepts of hope and beauty from the universe. But through all this time, the West Indies were really the one side that consistently played in a much more attacking, enterprising way. And the West Indies were the fastest scoring team in every decade of Test cricket from the 1940s up to the end of the 20th century. 6 decades in a row, they scored faster than any other team. So if you're looking for why Test cricket survived the dull years that it endured in the 60s, you think of Gary Sobers and the West Indies team, and then the Clive Lloyd side after that, Viv Richards through the 80s, Brian Lara in the 90s, Ambrose and Walsh. They almost kept Test cricket going for us to still enjoy today. So that's one of my, and just as an individual stat, Kumar Sangakkara, great Sri Lankan player, became one of the greatest cricketers of all time, ended up averaging close to 60 in Test cricket, well over 60 if you discount his test when he was a wicketkeeper early in his career, finished his career at Surrey, scored I think 10 hundreds in 13 championship matches in his last season. But he's a great story of improvement. In his first 50 matches, he didn't score a single century. That's in Sri Lankan domestic cricket and his early test match. He didn't score a single 100 and yet became one of the greatest players of all time. So if you're looking for, and we see that with Jimmy Anderson as well. After 20 tests, Jimmy Anderson was averaging nearly 40. And, in previous eras of England cricket, they could well have just thought, well, he's obviously not good enough, we'll never pick him again, as happened to numerous bowlers in the 80s and 90s. But they stuck with him, and he's became the cricketing legend that we've seen evolve. So that Sangakkara stats are one of my favourite stats of sort of personal improvement.
Thank you very much. Just to make a connection between you and Giles, you present a news quiz.
You didn't know this until I told you that I had a connection, did you? The only Jew in London who has never heard of Alan Coren. How wonderful if everyone was like Daniel.
Anyway, you did once, Alan was a team captain for 30 years.
Yes.
And I think you appeared, this is a fact you didn't know, you appeared on the show once with him.
I did, once, and then I
didn't
wasn't
know that?
booked again for about another 7 years on that show. So,
Well, by the same
Sangakkara.
token, every time I've ever met a news quiz producer since my father, we must get you on the show. Silence. Every time. Or they have to say it to my face, but then some conversation goes on behind the scenes. Can't have him. 40 years ago. Not that I mean, that's not a pitch. Saying it's not
I don't pick the team, sadly. So.
It's a Jewish do. If I didn't pitch for a job at some point, somebody here, what would be the point of being?
You might, if you kill Hugo Rifkin, then there'll be.
I've got so many reasons to do that.
Yeah. You've actually got 2 pitches because you also try and pitch to get on TMS.
I've been on TMS, View from the Boundary. It was awful. I went up, it was Trent Bridge, because you have to be really famous to get Lords. And I said, well, then Aggers thinks he'll schlep to Nottingham, no problem. And I went up. And I went up the night before, and Aggers said, well, let's go out for dinner, because he likes his food. And he said, we'll bring Athers, and I think Vic. And I booked Sat Baines, famous Michelin-starred restaurant. And I was... Sorry, you haven't come to me, but still, I've got the floor. And it's about food. That's what they're interested in. No, and I walked into if you want to, and I was then on telly quite a lot and was quite sort of famous. And we went into this restaurant, and if you want what fame is, to walk into a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant in Nottingham on the first evening of the Trent Bridge test with Michael Atherton, and this was about the place went silent, and I thought, they read the Times. Who? So I was, and indeed with Vic as well, and I was so nervous, and I wanted to be the big mensch, so I kept ordering sort of fine champagne, which the Times, Cristal, which the Times won't really reimburse me for. And Mike was going, well, the Times pay you up for that? And, yeah, of course, no, I'm the big man, knowing I'd have to pay for it. I got absolutely twatted. Went back to this tiny, pokey, hot hotel, didn't sleep, and was so awful at lunchtime when Aggers came to me that they never had me back.
So, wanted to ask one last question to start with, Andy. Do you see an overlap between your skills as a stand-up comedian and the radio presenter, and what you do as a cricket statistician?
Well, they seem quite different, obviously. But I think there's an element of well, obviously, there's a lot of creativity in comedy and trying to look at things from different angles. And in terms of the stats that I do on the radio, trying to find statistics that would help illustrate what's going on in a game. There's an element of sort of lateral thinking in that as well. So I guess it's trying to look at things from angles that wouldn't necessarily be obvious as a sort of commonality between comedy writing and trying to find illuminating stats.
Thank you very much. So I'll go back to Giles.
I've had some of my time. You can dock it. I've been a bit sort of hog-tied because Jonathan is a more distinguished columnist and Andy knows more about cricket, and I'm slightly worried about what I'm supposed to do. To be honest.
So can we go back to how you first got interested in cricket? Did you get the signatures of?
I got. Can I use the F word or not?
Both of it.
I will say something else. No, the only time I went to when I was about 9. My dad loved cricket, and I was watching TV, and I was sentient for I was born in '69, so I was sentient for the Headingley, and that was it. And I remember sitting watching it, and my nanny coming to get me for tea. Go away! And it was absolutely into the confectionery store and out again.
Yeah.
But that was like I was there. I was actually there, and it's better, as you know, than actually being at the ground, because then you just get drunk and don't see anything. Not if you're 10, possibly. But that was it. And then all my life, and I played a lot of cricket at school. I'm in Wisden, so my plan was always to be the second person to win the Nobel Prize for Literature and be in Wisden, which you'll know who that is.
Beckett.
Completely.
Yep.
People go Pinter, they're wrong. Now I'm looking more likely to get into Wisden again, frankly, than win the Nobel Prize for Literature. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So, what's the question again?
So how you first got into cricket?
It was about the autographs. No, but we had a house in the New Forest, and my dad took me along to see a charity game. And Colin Bland was playing, who had one eye at that stage.
Colin Milburn.
Colin Milburn, sorry. Colin Milburn. He had one eye, and he batted fantastically. And Alan Knott, who was then in the test team and was there. He didn't do a lot, but he was there in 81. It was pouring with rain, and Milburn batted for a bit, and then my dad was very excited, and I didn't know who he was. And then I saw Knott, and it was this proper test cricketer, and he'd gone into the building to get a cup of tea, and he was walking back to his car where his wife was, and he had that hat on that he always wore, the sort of the bucket hat that Stokes wears, and he had these 2 cups of tea, and I ran out with my Mr. Knott, sir, Mr. Knott, can I have your autograph? And he said, fuck off, kid, can't you see I've got my hands full? And that's like, never asked a cricketer for their autograph again. But no, I loved it on the TV, and my dad quite liked cricket. I mean, Jews and cricket. My dad was not a cricket Jew, not a sport Jew. He was from Southgate, and he was from they were originally Polish and everything, and cricket wasn't in his family. But he in his thrust towards the establishment after joining Punch, and he bought his sort of tweed thing, and he called it his English disguise and everything. He ended up being a member of the MCC because in those days you could, and he liked the idea of it. And so it was a thing that we slightly did together. He took me to Lord's to see a 60-over game in which Surrey were bowled out for something like 110, and Mike Brearley and Clive Radley used the whole 60 overs to get the runs. And my dad's going, I thought this was the exciting kind of cricket. And I also played at school. I played at prep school at the hall just around the corner. And then I played at school when I went to Westminster, and I thought I was really, really good because Westminster didn't play Tunbridge or Eton or anybody good. We just played like sort of St Paul's, UCS, JFS. People who didn't have bats and showed up in shorts. And I used to take wickets and thought I was rather good. Got to Oxford, didn't get to play. Played a bit for Brondesbury. The reason I just want to tell you, this is a side thing because it's cricket and heritage and what you pass on. The reason I've been looking rather rudely at my phone is that there is a match going on. You must know the big. It's North London versus North Middlesex in the under-11s to deprive Finchley of the title. There can't be a more Jewish thing than that. And we North Middlesex, North London, that my son plays for. I've come a little bit late because I was watching. He got his first 50. He captained. He led the side. Thank you very much. Would you all like to see the video of when he walked off? And so North London put on 141 for 6, and then I had to leave to come here. And so I then want to see that it's starting to rain. North Middlesex's response. If this is rained off, we then have to beat Stoke Newington on Wednesday. But if that's rained off, if Finchley beat Hornsey, they win. So I've gone, we're 83-5. The first 2 wickets were taken by my son's best mate, Raza, who's a Pakistani Muslim. And I was thinking, yeah, it's still a good story. Better still, Conrad Stenton, the Israeli, has taken 3. Right? So they've got them 83 for 5, and I'm slightly distracted. But anyway, it's a thing that I've passed on to my son, probably in equal amounts with the Jewishness. So he's only half. As some of you may know if you've been to a thing here before or at Southampton Shul where I've done it. I married a woman called Esther from Golders Green who's not Jewish. But when my relatives didn't come because it was in a church, they were pleased to hear nonetheless that it was Esther from Golders Green, and were very. But he's going to be about 6'3" projected, because he's got all these parents I married. He's got these massive goyim who can't play cricket, but I've got very high hopes for him. And I did weird things like he had a bris, but I don't think he's going to have a bar mitzvah because I didn't, and it seems he shouldn't be more Jewish than me because then I'd be jealous. So he's now going to be a sort of better cricketer, but possibly a better Jew as well. I'm not answering the question. That's how I got into it, and that's how I'm passing it on.
Thank you. Now, in your column in the Times, you often write about cricket, including matches in which you've played and which Sam have played. In fact, you even described in some detail an exciting match in which you and I won the match in the last over, last stand, because of an overthrow.
Yeah.
Which was most gratifying. But do you maybe you want to describe? But what I wanted to ask was, do you enjoy writing about cricket? Are you a wannabe cricket writer?
Two different things. One, you should know that Daniel is an incredible left-arm wrist spinner. Bowls Chinaman, which you're not allowed to do anymore. He's really, really, really good. Doesn't get brought on by captains who don't understand fucking spin bowling. They never do. But he's really... And the first time I met him, I went to play for the Garrick Club, which weirdly I'm not a member of because I was blackballed by an anti-Semite called Michael White, who writes for The Guardian. As you know, it used to be riddled with them, but until Piers Farmer, they were there. I did also say terrible things about Michael White on Twitter, but I only found out he was... Anyway. But that aside, I'm sure he's a great fellow and a colleague.
Great fellow.
Is he? I hear he's anyway. But I do play for the Garrick cricket team, and I went and I played with, and it's an extraordinary thing. And it was my first match, and I was batting with Daniel, and it was against Boodles. It was so P.G. Woodhouse, apart from these 2 Jews standing in the middle of it. And it got to the point where we didn't really know. We needed 3 to win, or was it 2? No one was absolutely certain. And if you play everyone sort of over 50, Boodles as well is the club. This is complicated. After my father died, my mother shacked up with this. Well, James Joel, maybe you know him, I don't know. He's one of those red trouser Eton guards. And it's just, what? But he's a member of Boodles. And so it was quite, I wanted with another Jew to smash Boodles for reasons that have nothing to do. As a classicist, you may find paradigms for some of that. And we did pretty well. I mean, and then he got to the last ball, and we ran 2, and then we stood there going, have we won? And the Garrick, they're all drunk and don't really know, and they shouted, you need another one, and we ran it, and we won, so that was very exciting. Do I enjoy writing about cricket? No, because, and I used to think it would be great, as I started to sort of get on in journalism and what is available to you. I in 2004, back at a time when cricket was not in the doldrums, but no one was that interesting, but 2005 Ashes came along, and there was Shane Warne, and there was Flintoff, and I thought this is going to be absolutely huge, epic. This is going to be like Italian 90 was for football, or Euro 96. And I went to the deputy editor and trying to say, I've done this sketch. I'm the restaurant writer. People, the readers. I was even young then. I was only 35. The reader, can I go and sketch? I just wanted to go to the cricket. Can I go and sketch? And they just said, no one's interested in the cricket. And the thing played out, and I'm terribly gutted that I missed it. But in the long run, no, because my skills are making things up, broadly writing things that aren't true. So then to actually report, and also I think Andy's in a great position to do what he does, to be able to watch it and enjoy it, and then convey love without having to laboriously. Anyway, we have Mike Atherton, the greatest cricket writer the game has ever. So what's the point of, he makes me cry to think of. I loved him as a batsman. When I first met him, I said, you had such a beautiful cover drive. Why didn't you play it more? He was when he was young, he was a beautiful cricketer, such a great man, such a great captain. He's now such a great writer. He's so wonderful. If I had to go to the cricket, and then write about. I mean, I don't know enough about cricket, but I think it would get it. The truth would get in the way. What I want to do is to arrive in a position which I have, where, for example, when the first day of the Lord's Test comes along, Mark Nicholas, the new president, invites me into his box on a Wednesday. I don't have to write anything. I just sit there going, marvellous, and drinking the free wine. So getting well known enough to be invited to people's boxes, because I don't like going in with a riffraff, except the boxes are all at square legs, so I can't at my age see the ball. I need to be in the Test match special box where you can see the ball moving.
Last question for you.
I think it better be.
In your first novel, Winkler, in which you tackled
Thank
questions...
you for first. Some say only.
in which you tackled questions of identity, the Holocaust, and what it means to be a Jew, the denouement took place at a cricket match.
Yeah.
Could you explain why?
Because I felt that Goyen would be bored with the Holocaust. So the only thing more boring than the Holocaust to some people is cricket, I suppose. No, the reason that the cricket's very, very central, because that was a book about me, and one of the things I played cricket in order to be English. I mean, when I went to Westminster in the early 80s, it was not a friendly place for Jews, really. I later got to Oxford, and all the people who'd gone to UCS, which I thought was a school for thickos, turned out to be, I met all these brilliant, funny Jews who'd gone there, hadn't pretended not to be Jewish. They'd all got a bit left-wing, but they were such fun. So my son starts there in September.
Jonathan went there also.
Great, yeah. Well, like my son, he wouldn't have got into Westminster either. I'm so excited. They keep coming along, the good news stories about UCS. So anyway, I played it because it just seemed like a very English thing to do. And in this book, but I always felt, so the book is what am I entitled to? What can I have? I'd go into the pavilion and there would be photographs from 1890 and these chaps with beards and their bats and everything. And I think my lot were just in the shtetl, you know, they were just sort of breaking bad earth with broken tools and making another Cholent. And, you know, who knows what games they played? Did they play games? So I just sort of felt at one time it was just great to be forging ahead, and I could pass. Especially my cricket-wise, I could pass, and I just sort of thought it was a great way to be not very Jewish. So, and this guy is kind of dealing Winkler. The book's called. You can't buy it, so I don't know how I'm telling you. But actually, you can buy it off me. I've got all the copies, and it's just everything sort of plays out. But oddly, it's the germ of it is when my dad came, and this is the story that begins the book. That I was at the hall, and it's odd thinking about because there were Jews, but the father's match. My dad came to the father's match, and he'd never played cricket, and he'd sort of borrowed kit, and he came along, and he was sort of in his sort of school shoes, and they put him at slip, and he couldn't sort of. And Jamie Mullock, I mean, maybe he was perfect, but he was the captain. He was batting for the boys, and my dad was at slip, and one of the dads, it was Neil Durden Smith, who was a big cricketer at the time, married to Judy the Chalmers, lived in the Highgate. Just to give you, he bowled. Jamie Mullock nicked it. My dad went like that, caught it. And I was just so pleased. And Mullock came off and looked at me and he said, "Your dad snaps at his catches." And I thought, you little bastard. What is the only, you know? And so that is actually the basis of the book. Oh. That's the best. That's the most interesting part of it.
Well, you had a better experience than I did. When my father played in the fathers and sons match at UCS Junior School, they had a fearsome fast bowler, and I persuaded the fast bowler to bowl a slow, gentle ball to my father first ball, so he wouldn't either be killed or had to miss first ball. So he got this nice, simple ball, but instead of pushing it for single, he tried to hit it for six, and he was caught on the boundary first ball.
Glory, like both of them.
But if he'd hit it for six, that also wouldn't have been an abuse of the...
You just can't get it right, Jews, can we? It's a terrible thing.
Anyway, Jonathan, moving on to you. Can you let us know a little bit about how you first got interested in cricket?
Well, my story brings together elements we've heard from both of these two, actually, which is that I was at UCS, the School for Thickos, and arrived there in the summer of 1977. By the time it was the summer term, 77, I had no awareness of cricket at all before then, but suddenly there were these kids playing cricket, and I liked it enough to sort of play a bit. There had been rugby, which was difficult for a Jewish kid, but cricket suddenly seemed appealing. You didn't get cold. You wore long trousers. So there were things about it that I liked in that first summer. That was really the first awareness I'd ever had of it. That's part of Giles' story. But the bit that really resonates, Andy, is your story about the TV. First of all, the Jewish parent who worries about their child spending a lot of time in front of the TV, now they've heard you, they're going to say it's investing in their future child's career that the kid sits there. I was just the same. In my day, it was Peter West at 11:25 BBC Two, the 11:30 start back then, Richie Benno and so on. They are so seared in my memory that I think of David Gower as some upstart newcomer. By comparison, because really it's Tom Graveney and the others who should be doing it. I was hooked exactly the same way, the sheer length of it, the slowness of it. And at that time, there was so little sport on TV. You'll remember with football, there would be, the big match on Sunday. And that was sort of it for live sport. Suddenly there was this thing that was going on in real time. So I was completely hooked. Thereafter, I sort of went in and out with it. When I was at school, there were other things that, that were flashier and shinier and got my attention right through even student days. I lived in America in the 90s, so I missed a lot of the doldrums period you're talking about. The thing that really came back was, just as you foresaw would happen, 2005 and that Ashes series, and particularly then I had I still have two young children, but they were very young then, two boys, and something about the sport and the model that was, I felt sort of displayed by this sport drew me in again, because I thought my kids can watch this. And the contrast with football, although my kids love football, but the contrast with football where you would see, the arguing with the ref, the spitting, the kind of phlegming out through their throat and nose simultaneously. You don't see that on cricket. And you could watch, you could encourage your 5-year-old and 2-year-old or whatever they were then to watch the cricket thinking this is real role models. They weren't that interested. Then 2009 comes along, and this is the moment when I realized, okay, I've made these kids into proper cricket fans. The moment where my older son Jacob, and he'll say this, became a cricket fan was the Monty Panesar stand at Cardiff. Who was at the other end?
Jimmy. Yeah.
Jimmy Anderson, Monty Panesar. Jacob saw me, he was then 8, and he saw me gripped by this thing as we watched the clock count towards sort of 7. And I had to explain to him that the most thrilling thing I'd ever seen was two players who would just ideally not score a single run, block every ball, not run or change between ends. That was the big drama, because you wanted Anderson to face rather than Monty, I think, was the drama then. And counting down seconds and the sheer sort of flow of relief when the clock finally turned and we'd save that game. And I think it's like the idea that if you can love a place when it's pouring rain on a Tuesday in February, if you can love cricket when you're watching two men do nothing, then you love the game. And so I really fell in love with it, watching it through the eyes of my son. They played and continue to play sort of garden cricket. I would, teach them to bowl and to bat a little bit until they outstripped me. By the time they were, I would say, 6, they got better than I am. But it is something shared between the three of us. I have later, relatively late in life, and through them, now become a fan of football. I go to the Emirates and see Arsenal with them. They got me into it. Yeah, Jewish crowd.
If you can go to the Emirates and still love football, that's kind of like
yes, I'm ready for that. I'm ready for that abuse, because the truth is, it's sort of a secondary affection for me. The real love is cricket. And a story that I grew up with in my family was that an elderly relative of mine, a great uncle, was widowed but then married again, different woman. And a friend of his said, "So how are things with your new wife?" And he would say, "They're fine, but when I dream of my first wife, it's a yontif." And that is sort of how I am about cricket. So cricket is for me the yontif, and the football is a sort of wochedik game, if anybody here knows that. It's a sort of weekday game, but the cricket is still my first love.
And you've written about how, when on holiday in France, I think during the 2009 Ashes, you found yourself obsessively checking your BlackBerry to see the latest scores.
Yes, I'm quite lucky actually that this wasn't in the era that now you would have, where I would have run up some enormous bill and been hugely disciplined. It's true, it became obsessive. Then it was very hard to do on a BlackBerry, but hitting refresh all the time. I seem to remember, I may be now mixing tours, there was some tour when again there was one of these stands, I think involving Graham Onions, where again it was, yes.
Onions, Lily Allen's favourite cricketer was all we remember about.
I mean, I remember trying to, what was the other, there was a point in the team, I'm just now remembering when my kids were very young, there were 3 different sort of food groups in the England lineup. There was onions, and you'll tell us, there were 2 other...
Well, it's mustard, he didn't play in tests.
Mustard and onions, it's quite true.
They played-
going back a bit.
Yeah.
They played for Durham together.
Yeah,
There were
mustard
people-
and onions. For
There were
Durham.
people caught mustard.
But the point was, I was completely great. And the truth is, this continues now. They will remember, everyone here, the game, I think it was at Old Trafford, where it was rain was threatening, and did in the end deny a result in the Ashes series last season. Now, every year, by tradition, I go on a walking weekend with a whole group of very old male friends, and it's fantastic. Except I was an appalling walking companion because I just had the earpiece in the whole time, and it wasn't even cricket. It was weather.
Yeah.
That's what I was listening to. I was listening to updates on Old Trafford weather, working out how many overs there could be, might be. And the friends of mine who are not great cricket fans were just thinking, this is beyond nerdery when you are obsessing with updates from the Met Office.
But the listening figures that the BBC got for that day were off the scale.
Hi.
Yeah. Because there was a lot of interest in the series, obviously, but it outperformed. I can't remember what else was on that day, but there was some actual sports happening. But way more people were listening to rain falling at Old Trafford.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's a tribute to your colleagues.
I think Andy will remember in the 1920s there were
Judging me on my hairline
there was a bowler called Fred Root, and the wicketkeeper was called Beat, and people out-caught bowled Root.
Yeah.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, not quite. England did in a couple of one-day internationals have an opening bowling pair of Willie and Ball, which I think was probably as childish as the England team has ever got selection.
Yeah. So moving on to 1 or 2 questions for all of you before we ask the audience for questions. Do you think there's an affinity between the world inhabited by Orthodox Jews and cricket? And I thought, Jonathan...
Well, you've pandered to me here because this is one of my pet theories about the game. Okay, so we mentioned the Emirates, and I've very sportingly brushed aside the abuse that directed at Arsenal. But one thing you do not really see at Arsenal, it's very occasional, I have seen exceptions, but you do not see, as a matter of routine, ultra-Orthodox fans of the Emirates. That's not the norm. You can go to Lord's or the Oval, you will always see, often towards the front rows, a whole lot of kids with kippot from Hasmonean or wherever, or City of London. It's just a thing. Orthodox Jews are quite into cricket. And now, why is that? And, you'll forgive me here, a whole series of terrible sweeping generalizations, but I'll get onto those. But my core argument is rules. Orthodox Jews love rules for their own sake. So, obviously, kashrut, you could just say, oh, no bacon, no shellfish. No. That's not going to keep people interested. You've got to have a whole lot of more arcane rules. Fins and scales, unless they shed the scales during a certain season. The degree of arcana, 3 hours meat and milk, but separate plates for Pesach. The layers upon layers. And the only field of human activity I can think of that has as many rules and that are as arcane is cricket. So that rule, for example, in cricket, where if you catch the ball and you have 1 foot in, but even if the rest of you is over the boundary, that's basically an Erev. That's why the Orthodox Jews love it, because that they can understand. It's like carrying your machzor, but your foot is on the inside. The tallis bag is outside, but the foot is inside. You haven't broken Shabbat. So the Orthodox Jew has an affinity with cricket because the sheer pedantry, the hair-splitting nature of it. That book, You Are the Umpire, that could be published but with an introduction by Jonathan Sacks. It could be like the Coren Sacks You Are the Umpire. So that kashrut is the rules is the first thing, and then I would say huge generalizations here, but for Jewish kids, maybe now it's very different. But a game where there's not physical, you don't have to tackle anyone. The Jewish mother or father, I think, felt more comfortable the kid playing cricket. It's true that the ball is very hard and potentially could hurt you, but there's literally pads, right? So, you feel better. The helmet, the pads, there's protection. They don't have to run around so much. They can get to wear long trousers. Catering. catering is a big part of this. The actual game includes lunch and tea. I mean, that is a Jewish game, right? When food is so important. Alcohol is not, woven into the game. Of course, people drink at the game, but food and drink really are, and it's basically a kiddush, tea. So I think the Jew feels very, very comfortable in cricket, even though, and this is where what Giles said was right, even though it's so English, and it's seen as such a sort of, it's about assimilation and integration and exclusion. All of that is true. And yet, in a way, once you're in, you realize, why did we feel this was so English? This is really basically a Jewish game. Thank you.
Well, you also, when you're playing, as Daniel will know, he didn't bowl very well the first couple of times I saw him. And I thought, and he was bowling, and he got hit a couple of times, and I was thinking, oh God, do you think because he's Jewish they're going to take him off earlier? And then we played again this season. You bowled very, very well, and I was, shepping knuckers there for this Jew who's bowling the wrong one. And they will forgive you as long as you bowl okay. But I then used to worry that they didn't like having. It was complicated to be a Jew. When I talked about being at Westminster, though, there were lots of, obviously, Jews in the cricket team because, I had 3 years in the first 11, which I wouldn't have got at any other school. I wouldn't have got 1 year. But in a school where you're basically taken for your maths, and it's little Jews who come top in exams, then I was quite a golem, really.
Yeah.
And but so I had these, and we used to talk, and then I went to play for the Old Westminsters quite a lot, the Old Westminster cricket team, and we talked about, and I was captained 1 year by Rupert Levy, another year by Jim Kirshen. I just missed Jonathan Zilka, he had a brother, and they were all, and then Benny Hyam was my spin bowling partner at one at the other end. My friend Jeremy Hyam, who I played with at the Garrick unit, all these Jews, and we thought we could have. We were in about 35, 40, and we were sort of the powerhouse of the West. We thought we could have an Old Wets Jews against non-Jews fixture, because we had, and we sort of wrote the names down who we got, and we looked at the teams, and the Jews had 6 spin bowlers and 6 opening batsmen who would be good lit around. The Goys had all the fast bowlers and all the big hitters. And it was true all the way down the line. I'm really sorry if anyone like Rupert Levy's here, because he actually did give it a whack. So yes, there are still rules, aren't there? That is the role that a Jew will play in a cricket team. Like us, we won the match with the bat, but we were batting 10 and 11.
And we won because of overthrows.
But yes, exactly. We were cunning. It's an accounting error, basically. We won.
I'm not, I couldn't say about Orthodox Jews. My father was a very, very unorthodox Jew. So I wasn't sort of brought up with those same traditions, but just thinking, the sort of the links. I guess, you think back through, Jewish history, 40 years to get somewhere, you're going to develop the patience for a 5-day game. Also, Noah very much like Old Trafford last year, that massive rain break. So there's elements that fit in with that, I think.
I would add to that gematria. Numerology. I think Jews are, maybe I'm wrong on this, but the first people to have an obsessive interest in numbers. I look at you. But I think it's not just you. I mean, stats and the interest in stats is such a big part of cricket. And Jews invest huge meaning in numbers, numerology, gematria, a mystical kind of meaning. I think that's there. The other thing that makes cricket very Jewish, 2 other things. One is history. You listen to football commentary, they will occasionally mention that it's the first time someone scored since whatever. But cricket commentary is all about the history of the game. And Judaism is all about dialogue with ancestors. All the time, the Talmud is just pages of argument between ancestors. That's what cricket is. All the time you're hearing generations and generations back of previous instances of this situation. A fourth innings run chase. What are the previous instances of this? Judaism
Grace was a patriarch, wasn't it? Grace with his big beard.
Yes.
And
he looked like Theodore Herzl.
Exactly. Very much. And he was a doctor. But those Lily White and Alfred Nim and these you go back and you're looking. That's the date of the beginning of the world. We don't date it to or AD or anything. It's when did cricket start? And it's kind of, it gets murky. And was it really cricket? Was it not cricket?
Yeah. But the other thing, this is the big generalisation, is cerebral. Okay, which is and I said it's a sweeping generalisation. But football is great. I love it for 90 minutes. Very exciting. To really engage your interest for 5 days, it's because it's more than just the physical prowess. It is about strategy, and there's a reason why the UCS Jewish nerds and the chess club and the cricket nerds all intersected, right? Because basically it is a form of chess on the pitch, and the argument that you would hear about, for example, Ben Stokes' early declaration last year, that is, to my mind, it's an argument about strategy. That is, with all respect to the people who do sort of 606 about football, they're not going to be able to have.
Can I also? We were talking about the prophets, and the patriarchs, but surely the first class game is the Old Testament, isn't it? The proper shit. It takes 5
Oh, I
days.
see. Yes.
But then, the good news about the New Testament, that's one-day cricket, or basic Christianity is basically T20. Smash, smash, smash. Eat what you like. I quite like that.
Yes, no, it's good. I think we've got it there. There's a couple of columns coming this weekend,
Yeah.
I feel. I think at least one. No, that's true. I mean, as I said, that is a bit of an ethnic generalization. If somebody else said it, I'd be offended. But I think there's something in that about what engages the brain. And I do remember, and I hesitate because I think he may even be here, but at UCS, there were the people who were, could whack it around, but then the really brainy guy who could fill in the score. What is it called? The thing.
Scorecard. Yeah,
Scorecard.
Scorebook. Yeah.
The scorebook.
Yeah.
The brilliant man who did that, but then a boy who would meticulously detailed stats and beautiful sort of calligraphy, went on to be the scorer for the game itself. And
he's sitting in the front row.
And he's sitting in the front row. Who is it? Because we were at school at the same time together. There he is.
So that's it, David Kendricks, who developed the ICC World Rankings. In fact, there are several Jewish cricket statisticians over the years: Irving Rosenwater, Eddie Solomons, Vic Isaacs, Benedict Mamange.
You make my point for me.
Do you have any sense of why so many of the top statos were Jewish?
I don't know. That's a difficult question to answer. I guess that that sort of cultural obsession with numbers, I guess, might be part of it. Maybe we were just. Certainly from my point of view, I was shit at playing. So those who can do, those who can't, obsess about the statistics of the people who can. So I don't know what. I don't know if any conclusions can be drawn from that. But what do you think, David? Any ideas?
I became the scorer mainly because I was so bad at playing. It was less dangerous to me sitting on the boundary counting the runs.
Yeah.
So that was just good news all round. So I was hitting the eye and the fees would stop being paid.
Yeah.
But this was at UCS, right? We were there at the same time, so I was right that the Jew was the scorer, while other people who were not Jewish weren't scoring the runs. The person who kept count of the runs was Jew. Yeah. In a way, you've sort of put your finger on. I played a tiny bit, but I wasn't any good. But we all sort of loved the conversation about it, the strategy, the tactics, the history,
in the more anti-Semitic environment of Westminster, I made myself good because I didn't want to be made to score, because then they might think I was Jewish.
Yes, I get that. Yeah, I get that.
Very
True.
Yeah.
Edward Usick used to score. He was Jewish. He had very neat handwriting.
Moving on to a different topic, I'm wondering, to what extent do you think that cricket has been a vehicle which has allowed or assisted Jews to integrate into life in Britain? I think, Jonathan, again, I think you had a few initial thoughts about that.
Well, I did, just because of the person who really took my initial sort of interest in cricket and made it a proper thing, which was my beloved great-uncle Mick Mindle, who is sort of has a place in Anglo-Jewish history as a leader of a Jewish trade union. He was leader of the United Ladies Tailors Trade Union, no women members. They were called Ladies Tailors because they made clothing for women. They were the leading union, main Jewish union in the East End, and he was the chairman of the union, extremely young, between 1929 and 1939, when he was just in his 20s. They had a rule book half in Yiddish, half in English. And he himself, because he was fighting Oswald Mosley and the fascists, and sided with the people who were fighting fascism, namely the communists, he became a member of the Communist Party. And so he was known as the communist in our family, and it was all of that. But this other thing that ran alongside that was that he was passionate about cricket and was good at it. And it was known that he'd had a trial for Middlesex, and he was a very useful spin bowler, confirming your
I'm not very useful,
observation.
but I see
The Jewish point there. And the interesting thing is his route into cricket was not one of the kind of schools that we're talking about, but was the Communist Party. And what a little known thing is that the sort of transmission mechanism, or the conveyor belt better, that took a lot of Jews in the East End into English culture was the Communist Party. It's what he explained to me. He said the Communist Party translated the importance of being earnest into Yiddish. So that people like him, kids like him, would know about Oscar Wilde and about English literature, and they taught him cricket. And he developed a complete love for it and had this trial for Middlesex. I don't know why it didn't go any further. It's interesting to speculate, given what you were saying about the exclusions that were there. But to him, it was absolutely a way into British life, and he really encouraged me to sort of, initially at age 10 or 11, to try and play, but then to follow the game. For him, they were linked, and that was at a point where British Communist Party saw no contradiction between being very British and communist, because there was no contradiction.
Do you have any thoughts about this issue?
About the... No.
Cricket as a way into assimilating.
Well, no, only the things that happen with me, but it's not a large part of the assimilation. I think football plays a much bigger part, doesn't it? Really, in taking part of. I mean, if you're a Jewish kid in London, the football fans are the scary ones, not the not the cricket fans. But no, I don't know. I was thinking you said the thing about he had this trial for Middlesex. My son had a trial for Middlesex and didn't get in. And the moment has passed for Jews, because really Middlesex is now Middlesex. It's almost entirely Indian kids, Indian or certainly Indian parents, Indian British kids, to a huge exclusion. The big clubs, Ealing, Stanmore, which was with my mother when my grandparents came from Slovakia in 1939. They landed first in Derby. Luckily got out to got to Stanmore, which was at least on the Metropolitan line then. I think it was the Bakerloo line then became the Jubilee line. And that was obviously a Jewish area. Now it's very, very Indian. And there's this thing where there's no racism. I know, because I went on a cricket tour of India with school when I was a kid, that there's Jews grow up quite slowly. White people, Indian boys mature and puberty a little bit earlier, and so that they're a little bit bigger, a little bit mustachioed, a little bit stronger at cricket. So, but it's a phenomenon of the Indian dad. They play cricket. We all know that the Indians are the Jews of now. So these teams are full of Indian kids up to 16, and then they disappear, okay? Because they all go off to be doctors and lawyers and property. And so the Middlesex team, you look at the actual team, and there aren't. So Indians are not using it for that, and they're having Indian clubs. So there are quite apart from this kind of the Muslim themes of Britain. And the phenomenon of the Indian dad was pointed out to me by a Pakistani friend of mine. He said, no, we don't do it. Pakistanis don't do it. If my son was good enough, he'd go and play for. But it's a particular phenomenon, and it's a thing that Middlesex have a sort of problem with, because you have these boys who are so good up to 16 and then disappear. And so that was only really about Sam not getting in. But I mean, it's a way of saying Sam had a trial for Middlesex. But it is an interesting thing, how the world has moved on. It's now Indian British now so dominate cricket here, but don't want to actually go on and play it professionally, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anything from a personal point of view, but I'm just thinking back to your exhibition last year and my father's family background. He grew up in South Africa, and his family were Lithuanian, or Jews from Lithuania who'd moved there in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And his uncles, two of his uncles were cricket-loving communists and worked for the ANC, but were really into cricket. And it was interesting that a lot of the cricketers that featured in your exhibition, there seemed to be more sort of Jewish cricketers played for South Africa maybe than other nations. So I don't know whether in terms of Jews integrating into South African society, sport was quite helpful for them. I know there were quite a lot of Jewish Springbok rugby players as well in the 50s and 60s. So I mean, I think that very much I guess depends where and when you are in the world. But I guess sport can clearly be a vehicle for helping you a community find a place in a society.
Yeah, the interesting thing about South African Jewish cricketers is that, apart from Ireland, more more Jews have played international cricket for South Africa than any other country, but a number of the Jewish cricketers either hid the fact they were Jewish. Sid Olin, as I found out after he died, was actually born Sidney Olinsky, the son of a kosher butcher, but preferred to pass himself off as Irish rather than Jewish. Fred Susskind, who went to UCS, he didn't want anyone to know he was Jewish when he played for South Africa.
Zuskin. Who was he kidding? With that name?
Manfred was his first name, so maybe he thought he'd get away with it. But and then there was Norman Gordon, who was the first openly Jewish Test cricketer for South Africa, and he first ball he bowled in Test cricket. Someone shouted out, "Here comes the rabbi," and he did well. But then he wasn't picked when South Africa toured England in 1947 because they thought he might face anti-Semitism and they wanted to save him from it. A bit like David Teager very recently, who was stripped of the captaincy of the South African under-19s, and I've got the quote here, what they said. They said if he stayed in position, it could result in conflict or even violence, including between rival groups of protesters. So it's an interesting mixture in South Africa of many Jews playing for the country, and of course, then there's a role model. Ali Bakr was a role model for people, but also disadvantages and discrimination. And I was wondering whether anyone else in a panel, apart from what we discussed already, has any thoughts about whether Jews have faced discrimination or anti-Semitism in the cricketing world.
Yeah, I couldn't say that. I wouldn't really know. I don't say.
You're the world authority on this subject, Daniel. I think.
Well, you've had this experience, haven't you? The one you told me about.
Oh, well, okay. Well, UCS tried to expel me for not playing cricket on Shabbat. And all the Jewish parents supported the headmaster. But then there was a meeting.
The Eric Liddell of Jewish cricketers.
Yes, it is.
Chariots of gefilte fish. I don't know.
I'm allergic to fish.
Of course you are.
But then it went to the governors to be approved, and I think, well, I understand many of the Jewish governors supported the headmaster and thought, we're really lucky that Jews are allowed to go to this school. Don't rock the boat. But the bishop who was on one of the governors said, well, if they tried to get me to play on Sunday, I wouldn't, and I don't think that they should do this. So the headmaster was overruled, but I was banned from representing the school at any sport. Right. If you look back at it now, you think, or two things, you think, how could they behave like that, and why did I stay at the school?
Yeah.
But hang on, sorry, if they'd overruled the ban, they thought because the bishop was right, why then didn't they pick you for the team?
Because they couldn't expel me from a school for it, but they could nonetheless punish me in other ways.
Like I said, they don't value spin bowlers. I bet if you'd been bowling at 90 miles an hour, they'd have found a way.
My father had a slightly different experience with religion clashing with sport. He went to King David School in Johannesburg. And on Saturday afternoons, he was he was obsessed with sport as a kid, and he used to, in between the religious services he had to attend at school, would run to the rugby stadium, to Ellis Park, to watch rugby or to watch cricket if it was on, until they realised what he was doing and made him sign in every half hour. And I don't think he ever forgave Judaism as an institution.
Well, Dennis Gamsey told me a sort of similar story, which is when he was 17 years old, he was picked for a domestic first-class cricket match. And it was extraordinary for him as a wicketkeeper to be picked when he's still at school. And it was plastered all over papers he'd be making his debut at this particular match. And then the local rabbi read it, and noticed that the match was taking place on Yom Kippur. So he and other members of the community and the family said, you can't play in the match. And there was a bit of a standoff, and eventually I think he didn't play.
But your exhibition, it's a riveting exhibition. People really should go and see it if you haven't seen it. The thing that comes through all the way is this isn't just once or twice. This repeated instances, even into quite relatively recently, your own experience is part of it, of Jews encountering barriers that people would have thought of as 70 or 80 years ago, carrying on right into now.
One of the interesting things is that a lot of this is not documented. People would say to me, you must have looked in the archives and in the newspaper archives and so on. None of it is documented. Norman Gordon told me about him not being selected for the 1947 tour. when he was 99 years old, and he'd never told anybody about it. Sid O'Lynn, Ali Bacher had played with cricket with him, and he told me he didn't think that he was Jewish. In fact, he gave me Sid's widow's number, and on condition that I didn't ask her whether he was Jewish. So I didn't do that. I asked her to tell me a bit more about his Irish background.
Very nice.
I remember one instance of possible anti-Semitism I encountered on a cricket field. I was playing for the Authors cricket side a few years ago, and I edged a ball from a medium pacer. The wicketkeeper was standing up, and it went off the edge of my bat and the fingertip of the wicketkeeper's glove, and first slip, who was the Bishop of Shrewsbury, dived full length and caught it one-handed. And he was about 65 years old. And I reckon, had I not been Jewish, there's no way he would have been.
While Daniel's finding his place, can I say, so
Oh, yes, update, yes.
So North London, he made 141 for 6 off 20 overs. North Middlesex replied, it was raining, and they made 139 for 20 overs. North London win by 2 runs and win the league.
Wow.
So
I think that showed why, just to go to the numbers of cricket, the score you gave earlier on, so was it 141
141
and
off
86
20.
for 5?
yeah.
And everyone, if you're a cricket fan, you can make the sort of calculations as
Immediately.
the likelihood. You can almost picture the game, and that's I think why why cricket on the radio works so well, and
Yes.
Because it's a game you don't actually have to watch, and in a way you almost don't have to.
All I could see is the scorecard because there's this app called Play Cricket, so it's being updated every over and thing. And I can when it says who's taken the wickets and who's. I mean, I'm afraid Coren, 4 overs, took none for 28. So, given that they made 139 from their 20, you can see that obviously Sam was just outside the run rate. If they'd all bowled with the same economy as Sam, they'd have made 140. We'd have still won, but we were still off the. No, it's.
I remember I was on holiday in Norway during the 2019 Ashes. First test at Edgbaston was an amazing game, fluctuated both ways. Steve Smith got 200s. Australia ended up winning. But I was in the countryside in Norway with intermittent Wi-Fi signal and a family that I was supposed to be on holiday with. So I was basically checking the score every 20 minutes over 3 days, the last 3 days of the game. And it was absolutely gripping because of the narrative structure of cricket and the way the numbers sort of can tell the story of a game. So we just had a little example of that with your son's game.
But I've just realised that I think we are talking here about the long form of the game, right? I think when I was going on about the Jewishness of it, I have in mind the 5-day game, the test game. You know that old Lenny Bruce riff when he goes through what's Jewish, what's not Jewish, that thing. Recently updated by Josh Glancy in the Jewish Chronicle, where he just went through things, Atlantic Ocean, Jewish, Pacific, Goyish, North Sea, crazy Goyish. Right? Test cricket, Jewish, T20, Goyish. Right? I mean, instinctively we know that. The game that we're talking about is the luxurious 5-day...
There's no subtlety, no finesse with
and on all those cerebral things I was talking about, apply to the test game.
And you haven't got time to have your proper lunch and dinner.
Catering, we're back to catering. It's not a Jewish... I mean, T20, I'll go along, but I feel about T20 a bit like I feel about football.
They play
fine, I enjoy it.
Even at Lord's, I'm not home till 9:30, which is after my bedtime. And so it's terrible. You've got to be home for supper.
Funnily enough, I went to a T20 game, the middle, the bash thing, whatever, the T20 thing, and Middlesex, and it was terrible rain, and it was only 4 overs. But I was looking around, and there were quite a lot of Jews there who were all thinking, this way we get to eat. And they did. Then straight away, every restaurant in St John's Wood was full of people who'd left early, because everyone else was staying because they all think we can still drink. But the Jews were all going to the restaurant. They were all full, and everyone's thinking, it's actually not so bad here, because we didn't.
Before I open it up to the audience, I want to ask you one more question. In comparison with, for example, the number of Jewish Nobel Prize winners, there have been relatively few Jews who've done well at cricket. In the exhibition, we highlight Netta Reinberg, who was the only Jewish person to have played for England. Unfortunately, she got a pair in her only test match. Michael Klinger may have been nicknamed the Jewish Bradman, but he only played 3 T20s for Australia. why haven't Jews made more of an impact as players in cricket?
Well, that's a very complicated question. I think. I guess a lot of it is, I guess, the number of Jews who play through childhood. I don't know, like you're talking about the Indian children now, that sort of career goals and expectations, I don't know why.
But look
so
how many
few.
look how many of them are the children of cricketers.
Yeah.
My son, I started because I love cricket. I started him about sort of 6 or 7. But if you see now Michael Vaughan's kid,
Yeah.
you see Rocky Flintoff. You see they've been having proper coaching from sort of 1.
Yeah.
And they say it's not such. I write columns of the Times. I saw what my dad did and I do it, and my sister saw it and did it. And it's not easier than being a cricketer, I don't think necessarily. But it's just if it's not laid down for you. And the point is that it was their fathers then. So my grandparents, my great grandfather on one side spoke Yiddish, never learned English, and my grandparents on the other side spoke Slovak and Hungarian. And then their English was never much good. It wasn't. It's hereditary. I mean, you have to really to come in from the outside and do it. You have to really, really, really want to, wouldn't you? It's just not one of the goals that's set up for us, I think.
Do you have any thoughts on this?
No, I think both of those views are persuasive. Probably it's true that if there were more Jewish cricketers, then there would be more, because it has that sort of replicating thing, and aspiration must be part of it. But then I think of my own early career and I see David Kendrick's there, and I think maybe we weren't that good.
Is that okay? That's what I want. Is that okay? Is it okay that we're just not quite as athletic? Because whenever the conversation comes around, people go, "Oh, Mark Spitz," and I go, "He probably wasn't Jewish, and it's probably because his parents had a swimming pool or something." But it's so few. Is it okay? Is it that we're just?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's a very small sample size, but if we look at Freddie Truman as a one-man sample, because he discovered late in life that his maternal grandmother was Jewish.
You're sceptical, aren't you?
He asserted that.
So he asserted that.
Yes, yeah.
But,
In a very Jewish way, I would say.
Well, there's this theory that he's a sort of fabulist.
Well, what fabulous.
The Walter Mitty, who takes on a Jewish identity, which
I've heard. I've talked to a few people about it. One old Yorkshire cricketer said he liked money.
dear.
Perpetuating another stereotype. But somebody else said that he always felt an outsider in terms of establishment, and somehow he wanted to feel an insider in some society.
Friedrich Treumann. Obviously.
I mean, it'd be quite a weird thing to make up.
Wouldn't it?
But anyway, so one of England's greatest ever fast bowlers.
Well, he asserted he claimed he was Jewish, because we have all these other cricketers who tried to hide the fact they were Jewish.
Yes, but if he, but he didn't know that during his career. So
Or didn't assert it during his career. Yeah. Just one little fact you might want to know is that you mentioned Rocky Flintoff. I think he's batting number 5 for England under 19 against Sri Lanka. Number 4 is Noah Fane, who I've recently found out has Jewish heritage.
Excellent.
Are you going to out him? I suppose you can.
I have just had, haven't I?
But Flintoff, can we do?
I was going to say, yeah.
He likes chess.
Flintoff.
Okay, we've got some material to work with here. Okay.
The last question before I turn it back is this. Have you felt any particular pride in the achievements of Jewish cricketers such as Ali Bacher, Julian Wiener, Michael Klinger, etc.? Anyone?
Well, I didn't really know about them until I saw your exhibition, and I thought it was interesting to me that I didn't know about them. And part of that, one of the sort of themes in your exhibition is that this was kept on the down low all the way through. They didn't. I mean, the story of Mandy Yachad playing in his tzitzit, I didn't know that. I confess that I'm not a close reader of the Jewish Chronicle's sports pages, and so maybe I would have known that if I were a closer reader. But I didn't know that. I think it is one of these things that. Look, from the outside, it's not told for all the reasons of institutional anti-Semitism, which you have charted very, very well. On the inside, it's not really told, probably for the reasons you've said about it. It's not aspirational. But, it's not my son the cricketer, is it? It's you'd rather say my son the columnist who also plays cricket.
Which would you prefer to be, a first-class cricketer or a columnist?
Now, it would be quite embarrassing if I had to show up on Wednesday with my left arm dibbly-dobble. It would have been a great thing. I played a bit of club cricket. I had a trial with Middlesex. They weren't interested. I'm not going to call it anti-Semitism. I refused to bat because the ball was going a bit fast, And I sort of always thought that I was deluding myself for quite a long time. Little kids have to believe. I think my son still believes. He played for London schools, which Morgan played and Alistair Cook played. But it's he also, and I would love it more than anything. But I'm at Jews are in a particular. So the thing I was saying about Indians, they pull the kids out because they can't take the risk. The family, they don't take the risk that he's going to be fine if he's going to be Virat Kohli. What Indian parent wouldn't want that? But if not that, then a dentist with 3 or 4 practices would be good. Not just, but rather than just working in just with a shop. So it's and that was the thing with Jews probably. I've now evolved at a level, I'm not that well off, but I'm fine. If my son wants to be a cricketer, I will back him all the way. And we have a friend who plays for Middlesex, a boy called Luke Holman, who's 21, went to Ackland Burley, comprehensive around the corner, lovely kid. He earns 35 grand. He plays all 3 forms of the game. He earns 35 grand a year. It will go up to about 45 unless he plays for England, gets a central contract. He will never earn the money that Sam. I mean, you don't earn that much as a journalist now, but you earn more than that if you're So, but I am relatively wealthy. I could set him up. I could sort him out. I'll drive him to the games. He can have the kit. There is a wealth element to cricket. He's not going to be. He isn't good enough. But because those are the 2 kinds of cricketers, or always were, the gentlemen and the players. But the guys who had to, because the alternative was the pit, and there were the chaps who did it while the tenant farmers were just paying the money into their Coots account, and they went to Oxford and Cambridge and stuff. And so he would be able to be a gentleman cricketer on my watch, and that I would. Shit, it's like nothing on earth. But then afterwards have a column.
Mike Brearley is a very sort of role model, isn't he, in this regard? In other words, somebody who's really accomplished in a professional field and also reached the pinnacle of the game. That, I think...
He did it quite a Jewish way, you're saying?
What I'm saying is that the Jewish parent, if you went home and said, look, I want to be a cricketer like this guy, who then also became a top psychoanalyst in Swiss, is it in Swiss Cottage or something? It's very Jewish.
Yeah. And he tricked Ian Botham he tricked Bob Willis. No, he tricked Botham into batting well, didn't he? And then he tricked Botham, and he tricked Willis into bowling faster. Or how did it work with him? He had something. He had something he thought he did with Botham, didn't he?
Yes, I can't remember specifically. In 1981, there was a spell where Botham didn't want to bowl at Edgbaston, and then he persuaded him. He
sort of fooled him. He tricked him like some sort of fake.
Well, Brearley's the example of somebody who you should hear Jeff Boycott talking about how Brearley's batting ability, but he actually wasn't. He was a pretty good record actually for Middlesex, but he never got a century for England in 50 tests. But he was picked purely as a captain and inspiring the team and his tactics. And actually, he did tell me once that he wondered whether he had a Jewish heritage because his mother came from Eastern Europe. She lived in Swiss Cottage. Most of her friends were emigre Jews.
Come on. Yeah. we're counting him. Can I just throw and let me throw in one last thing, which is he was a schoolmaster at UCS. Just before he became, did you remember that? I mean, the year before I went to UCS, he had been a teacher at the school, and so he's ticking every box. We're counting.
Really, so he then came to Westminster to teach psychodrama and deal with something. And I was in the first 11, and it was about 86. Brearley had retired, and Brearley, who was this, and he was having a bat in the nets. He wouldn't get involved in the cricket. And the cricket master said, Giles and another guy, Danny, do you want to go and have a bowl at Brearley? And I thought, oh, it's Brearley. And it was the nets up by the pavilion at Vincent Square in Victoria. And I went to bowl my first one at Mike Brearley, this nerd, and he kicked me out of the playing field into the road, 300, ball after ball after ball. And that was when I realised I probably wouldn't have been a bit.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if I could just give a chance for the people in the audience to ask 1 or 2 questions.
Got one down here.
Okay. Hey, yes. Could you bring a mic over, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. First of all, great. What a super evening. My name's Robbie Book. I'm from the Club Cricket Charity. And to follow on just on one point before I ask my question, my scorer at Carmel College, where I went to school, was Matthew Engel. So it follows into some kind of pattern there, guys. And we also, the old Carmelians used to play against the Dominicans, which sounded like nuns against monks. It was blacks against us. But that's a different crowd. The question I want to ask is, in my club, there is a huge diversity. We have a lot of kids. It's empty during Maccabea. It's empty during when Pakistan plays. It's empty when India play. I'm lucky. We're in a very cosmopolitan area in North London,
Which club is that?
Totteridge.
Oh, Trafford.
And Totteridge Millhillians it is now. But the point about it is that not all clubs are like that. Club cricket is the home and base of everything that is what you are now talking about, your 5-day game. Without it, there is nothing. And club cricket is important. What are your views on how we could make, how it is possible to get that diversity to a wider audience?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, my name's Posen, Mike Posen. All three of you talked about how terrestrial television was what encouraged you to become involved in cricket. Now it's paid for and it's Sky. Is there any chance that the finances of cricket could allow terrestrial television to come back showing 5-day matches?
Should we deal with which we do first?
Well, I think they're quite linked in a lot of ways. I think in terms of the who is playing cricket and therefore who is playing for cricket clubs. If your child doesn't go to a private school, then certainly my children go to the local state schools, and there's been basically no cricket at all from the age of 5 through to 18. So if you don't have a parent who is into cricket, then you're unlikely to fall in love with it. And like I said, without it being on terrestrial as it was when we were kids, that again narrows down the chances of you finding it. So in terms of who then plays in club cricket, the game is not or has not been reaching the every part of society. So I think those two are quite.
They are. I mean, football isn't on terrestrial either. Live football isn't on, and they find that. I mean, there is. I mean, the fact that Rupert Murdoch pays my checks is not a reason that I would support cricket being on it. I wish it were on it, but in the same position, you just get the highlights. So it should be. But you're talking about But if whatever money there is, wherever it should be from, should trickle down as the grassroots of the game. And the diversity, and we had that Azim Rafiq stuff, which people have different opinions about what really happened and how endemic the racism was and where it came from. I was talking about there is a division. Famously, there are London Muslim cricket teams, and it's not born out of any racism. It's people who are similar wanting to get together and play sport together. And there are ranges of diversity, and my son Sam there's a couple of these Israeli kids, his best mates from Pakistan, there's a couple of Indian players. There is a diversity. They are about 6 of them at private school, and then there are some who are some of them are at state schools. Obviously, they don't have cricket there. I was talking about this guy Luke Holman, who was at Ackland Burley, which is a comprehensive in the top of my road in Tufnell Park. And I hope he plays for England. He will be the first London comprehensive boy to play for England for quite a long time. My children were both at local state schools, and my daughter still is, but she's not interested in cricket, so she can stay there. My son, she's at Camden School for Girls, she's fine. But my son I sent him to a private, literally, for the cricket. It is a thing that absolutely it ought to be done. And the disappearance of black cricketers is absolutely terrible, and that's the process of deracination from Caribbean immigrants who is about dads. You run out of a dad who's into cricket, and the new black immigrants in this country, African or sub-Saharan African, are not from cricketing cultures, so that you don't get cricket. But it is terrible that and also, look, if you're going to throw everything into playing sport, there are more jobs as a footballer, and there's more money as a footballer. So if you are a supreme black athlete of 10, the chances that you're going to want to go and be a leg spinner for, Lancashire, it's pretty Glamorgan.
The ACE programme is doing some really amazing work, I think, trying to get more black Afro-Caribbean children playing cricket again. So I mean, I think cricket has become increasingly aware that the pathways that they talk about have not been giving all the opportunities that they could give to the broadest selection of children. So
I would really encourage it to be back on. I'd be delighted to see it back on terrestrial TV. I take Giles's point.
But you remember
that football isn't. I know it isn't. But I think that football is so dominant in the culture. There's so much money in it that kids get it anyway. Cricket needs that help, And I just think about the Channel 4 coverage of the series in 2005. It definitely did recruit a whole new generation of kids.
But it did go off for the racing someday. People don't remember that.
And that was
During they went to the racing on Channel 4 during.
Yes, no, I know. But the point is, it needs to be sustained. It just strikes me, this is half in your area statistically, given how few schools play cricket, because my kids' experience at state schools was the same as yours, there just wasn't any. It means that the England cricket team, it's astonishing that it does as well as it does, because it's recruiting from effectively a nation, a sort of private school nation of like 1.5 million people.
Yes, but
rather than a country of 70 million people.
But then I think in terms of how good an international side is, population and numbers playing isn't necessarily particularly useful predictor. You see that with New Zealand in a lot of sports, that it's more about facilities. So actually, although there's a narrower range of children playing, the private schools facilities now, they all have professional ex-professional players as coaches, ex-internationals as coaches, indoor nets, in a way that's sort of 30 years ago when I was at school, not many schools had that. So these kids are almost being trained to an almost professional level.
It's true, but what I was thinking is that there's tons of Indian and Pakistani kids here who should be playing cricket on the street and all that kind of thing, and we should be drawing from all of those, and we're not, because they're not playing at school. So I think a key thing to unlock it would be back on terrestrial TV.
But I do think that is, as Giles said, it's not so much that Sky have taken it away, it's that the terrestrial channels didn't really want it anymore.
Isn't it that the ECB wanted too much money?
Well, I mean, it's a bit of all of those things, I think.
Because that seemed to me so short-sighted that the ECB thought, right, we'll get a big quick buck now, but they were not investing in the long-term future of the game. To think we need new cohorts of kids falling in love with this game, so we'll take a hit on getting millions from Sky now. We'll get less, but we'll have new Andy Zaltzman, Jonathan Freedland, Giles Coren in the future falling in love with this game.
I would love it if the BBC bought up the cricket and put all the other shit they put on and got rid of it and just played only cricket. that would be absolutely fine. You'd lose.
We may be a minority of that view, but I agree.
Just get rid of Strictly and all that EastEnders rubbish and just for cricket.
I like Strictly as well.
Okay, I think that's a good note to end on. What a fabulous evening, and so lovely to hear such warmth and laughter from the audience. Thank you, Daniel, for bringing this together. Thank you to our three wonderful speakers, Giles, Jonathan, and Andy. You were fantastic. Just really, really enlivened us. Thank you. Please do keep the conversation going. We have the restaurant and the cafe area for you to talk in. If you're lucky, some of the speakers might be able to join us for a bit. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Enjoy the rest of the sport in the summer, and hopefully we'll get some sunshine as well to be able to enjoy it in. Thank you for coming, and do come back again. Take care, everyone.